Warm welcome to all those who are joining us now online. And I think it has already been explained to others, including Maurice, that because we record the lecture, a lot of members now tend to look at the lecture later when the timing is more convenient for them. So the attendance now is undoubtedly going to be just a fraction of the total viewing audience that we will eventually get. So a very warm welcome to those joining the lecture, and a particular welcome to Maurice Handley and his moral support, who's lined up close by, Ben Croxford. I'm sure we can look forward to excellent and informative talk on early Newcomen engines in Whiston and Prescot. Over to you, Maurice.
Right, thank you, Roger. Can you all see my cursor?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, if you can see it, Roger, it's okay. It's there. The first Newcomen steam engine in Lancashire was erected in Whiston, and I read this in Alan Crosby's History of Lancashire about 10 years ago, possibly even more now. And my immediate reaction, because I live in Whiston, was, where was it? So this all started with me looking for the first Newcomen engine in Lancashire. And along the way, I communicated with Ben Croxford, who's the Merseyside Historic Environment Record Officer, and we were debating about where this might be, along with a lot of other things, because I seem to be constantly in contact with Ben, and this is how we started really together on this. So where is Whiston? Well, here's Liverpool. Prescot is about 13 kilometres east of Liverpool, and Whiston is just next door south. The town or the parish is just south of Prescot. And you can see here on the screen the Liverpool and Manchester Railway, 200 years old in 2030. The branch up to St Helens and Wigan, which dates from 1870. The M62, the line of the Liverpool to Warrington Turnpike, the M57 running up to Switch Island and running south towards the River Mersey is the A5300. Now, there's archaeological evidence of Romano-British settlement along this corridor. And also, there was a Roman tile works in Tarbock. This is the Tarbock interchange, and there's a Roman tile works round about there. So that's probably the signs of earliest signs of industry or factory working in Merseyside, possibly. In the 16th century, there was coal mining in Prescot and Whiston in this area, using shafts, not bell pits, using shafts and roadways and props, pit props, and so on. And in the 17th century, a local gentleman called Henry Ashton had a coal mine in Whiston, round about here, but his probate shows that he had uh, a stock of coal on the wharf at Dungeon, down near the airport, and there were 400 works of coal. And one work of coal is 3 tons of coal. So he had really a year's worth of supply of coal down here, probably mined in the summer and taken down and stored down there in the winter for sale along the Mersey, possibly towards Liverpool. If we look at an engraving of the south prospect of Prescot, this is virtually looking from Whiston. You can see the market town of Prescot on the hill with the church, with which looks pretty well like it does today. You can get this view today quite easily, but you won't see a pottery kiln or a windmill, and you won't see too many houses of that period. You're more likely to see a supermarket or two. Here there's a glass cone, um, gloriously out of proportion. It's much larger than it should be, but that was used for making window glass. And if you're familiar with the Buck Brothers engraving, there's a little bit of artistic license with this, because over here we've got the viewing tower for the Earl of Derby's racecourse, which is actually where the safari park is today, and should be due north of the church, so you wouldn't be able to see it from here. You can spot here, I'll probably show you this again in a better picture, a horse engine, or a whimsy, which is used for winding coal off from a coal mine or coal shaft. And this looks like a pile of baskets of coal. Possibly 60 baskets would make a work, and that would be roughly what a coal miner would expect to get up to the top in a day. I just want to look at the geology of the area, very simplified. South Lancashire is really two sorts of solid geology: Carboniferous strata, which contains the coal and the coalfield, and well, Triassic, perma-Triassic, depending whether you think it's just just Triassic or a mixture of the two. So this is sandstone, and this is a mixture of coal and sandstone and millstone grit and limestone. And the coalfield down here is separated from the sandstone by a boundary fault. In effect, the coalfield dives underneath Liverpool and then reappears on the Wirral coast or in Flintshire. And this little promontory in the coalfield, the exposed coalfield, is here. So Prescot there, St Helens to the northeast, Whiston to the south, Huyton just on the edge of the coalfield, and Tarbock on the southern edge of the coalfield. I just thought I'd slip this in with the age of the coal, 325 million years ago, and a little explanation, which I'm not going to read through. I put this in because there might be some younger viewers who perhaps don't know where coal comes from, perhaps have never seen it except in a steam railway. The relevant part is coal measures are repetitive sequences of coal seams, floodplain mudstones, lake or marine limestones, and riverbank sandstones. They're mixtures where the coal seam can be just a thin seam, say 1 metre thick, or it can be 15 metres thick. If we take a section through the coal measures at Prescot, south through Tarbock towards the Mersey, in effect, the coal seams dip, that is slope, to the south. And if you dig a coal mine, put a shaft down, say there, you can mine the coal uphill or downhill. Mostly in the 18th century, they would have gone what they call upbrow or uphill. The problem is that the water table there can be about 30 meters below surface level or less. So once you get to any depth, you're restricted by water coming in from the groundwater supply, flooding the mine. And then if you try to go downslope, then you're going to get a lot of water into the mine. And certainly some of the clays in the coal measures are very, very sticky when they get wet. It becomes almost impossible to work. So there was a need recognised in the 17th century and the beginning of the 18th century that we've got to deal with draining the mines. This included tin mines in Cornwall, where Thomas Newcomen was working. So Thomas Newcomen first used an engine to drain water from a coal mine at Dudley in Staffordshire, in the Black Country, in 1712. Newcomen built his engines in an engine house, which this is a replica in the Black Country Living Museum. And the engine was a beam engine. So there was a beam sticking out through a hole in the wall of the engine house and a chain attached to a pump which went down the shaft. So the shaft would be here, and then the beam would rock, or bob was the word they used, bob up and down, lifting the pump shaft, lifting the pump on in the pump shaft. Inside the engine house, there was an arrangement with a very strong wall carrying the beam, taking the weight of the beam and the pump and the bits on the engine. So the beam would pivot. Oops. The beam would pivot there. This end of the beam was attached to a piston running in a cylinder. There's a boiler underneath, which is more like a kettle than a boiler. It didn't boil steam at steam pressure. It would be just above atmospheric pressure with a fire underneath. Steam from the boiler would be allowed through a set of valves here into the cylinder. When the cylinder was full with steam, water was allowed to spray, cold water was allowed to spray into the cylinder, and that would cause the steam to evaporate very rapidly. That would create a vacuum in the cylinder, which would cause the piston to be sucked down, or rather the atmospheric pressure on the top of the piston would force the piston down, pulling the beam down, pulling the pump up, and you get a pump action bringing up some water from the bottom of the shaft. I'm not going to go into the way the pump operates. It's a little bit complicated to explain, but eventually the water would be pumped to the surface. Now, because this works on atmospheric pressure rather than steam pressure, Newcomen-type engines are also called atmospheric engines. They're called Newcomen-type engines because Newcomen didn't necessarily build them. They're quite often built by other people. Newcomen engines alone are just engines built by Newcomen, but if somebody else built an engine, then it was called a Newcomen-type engine. And on documents and plans and maps and so on, they're often called fire engines because they are using a fire to raise steam. Now, During the 17th and the start of the 18th century, the Case family of red hazels in Huyton were involved in coal mining and salt refining. At that time, the lord of the manor of Whiston was Cuthbert Ogle, and in February 1701, he leased parts of the manor to Jonathan Case. A list of the properties in the lease includes Whiston Hall, the Coal Pit's Tenlands, or if you like, the Tenlands Coal Pit, and the Great Tenlands and Little Tenlands. We think Tenlands refers to strip cultivation, possibly medieval. Jonathan married Cuthbert's sister. That was a clever move, actually. And he inherited the manor of Whiston when Cuthbert died. So not only did he have a coal mine in Whiston, but he owned the rest of the Whiston manor. The lease from Cuthbert Ogle is in John Ryland's library, and I've put the reference at the bottom here. Nicholas Blundell's diary, you may have heard of. In his diary, he for May 5th of May 1719, he wrote, "I went to Mr. Case that's Mr. Case's house, but he was not at home, so I smoked a pipe with his son Henry, and then went to the new engine as is to draw up water from one of the coal pits. Thence I went to the new glass house, but they were not working." So we know that there was an engine visited by Nicholas Blundell in 1719. We know that's a fire engine because when Jonathan Case died in 1729, he left his estate to his son Thomas, and his will included £1,500 to reimburse Thomas for the cost of erecting a fire engine in Whiston. So we now know that's a fire engine. And the references for these are below. I mentioned John Harris, who wrote in the Transactions. That's Professor John Harris, who came from St Helens, wrote about the early steam engine on Merseyside well, he read the paper in 1952. So we've known about this entry in Nicholas Blundell's diary for quite a long time, but it never seems to have been followed up. Here we have the first edition 6-inch OS map of 1850. Prescot here with the church about there. Red Hazels, the home of the Case family, is over here. And nowadays, the M62 runs through about here, and the interchange, Prescott Liverpool Road interchange, is there on the sorry, did I say M62? M57. And we think that Nicholas Blundell would have ridden possibly this way into Whiston, looking for the new engine. I'll just point out a few other features on this. This is the Liverpool and Manchester Railway. We've got Prescot Hall here, which I shall mention later on. Whiston Hospital. This is Whiston Workhouse over here. Now the new Whiston Hospital. And I'm actually talking to you from here, between these two Delphs sandstone quarries. So just focusing on the area around Whiston Hall. So this is the route we think from Red Hazels. And we think that Nicholas Blundell rode along here and then up here. And our reasoning was that these two fields here are called Engine Hay on the tithe map. Now, that is typical of areas or fields where the coal mine had a fire engine or a Newcomen engine or even a James Watt engine. It went on into the tithe maps on mid 19th century. So we think there was an engine here. This building is called Hole i' the Wall, which probably refers to the hole in the wall, the bob wall, the front wall of the engine house, through which the beam projects. I'll just point out this is called Pottery Lane. There was a pottery there, certainly in the 19th century. This is, again, the Liverpool and Manchester Railway going to Whiston. Whiston village is just off here. There's a brook here called Stank Brook, and I'll be mentioning the word stank later on. Looking at the first edition geology map, we get some more clues. This is 1860. Here's the hole in the wall. I can't do, well, I could try the Lancashire accent, hole in the wall. And it says old pits to Tenlands coal. So it's telling us that there are old pits at this point, and they're mining the Tenlands coal. So remember the coal pits, Tenlands, from Ogle's lease to Jonathan Case. This is the clue that we're talking about the right place. I'll come to colliery later on. Here we've got the outcrop of the Tenlands coal. Typically, coal seams are named after some feature where the outcrop will reach the surface or are close to the surface. And we think this might be where the strip cultivation was. And this is a double seam. It's a lucrative seam. There's actually two seams of coal there. Here we've got Prescot Hall, and this is called Hall Lane. Sorry, that's called Stank Lane there. Hall Lane is actually up here. It's called Stank Lane at this point. And this zigzag is the boundary of Whiston at that time. So here we're in Whiston, in Case's land, and here we're in Prescot. Having decided where we think the first engine might be, we wanted to look at who supplied the components for the engine. And one obvious source is the Coalbrookdale Company of Ironbridge. Unfortunately, their records were destroyed. We don't have any records going back to the early 18th century. But William Norris, who was the managing director of the company in 1881, gave the Institution of Mechanical Engineers notes about the company's sales of cast iron cylinders and other components for Newcomen-type engines. And then in 2021, Dr. John Konevsky of the University of Exeter presented a paper to the International Early Engines Conference, giving the information he retrieved from Norris's notes. He called the notes the Norris files, and that included details about customers and items sold to collieries in South West Lancashire. So here's an extract from the Norris files as given by John Konevsky. In 1744-45, Coalbrookdale supplied Cobham and Makin at Prescot with a cylinder bottom, piston and pump components, and it cost £79, 3 and 8 pence. There were lots of other entries, but I just selected this one as well. 1748, Jonathan Case had components supplied by Coalbrookdale for Whiston Colliery near Prescot. A bit later in the century, he paid £140, 8 and 4 pence. Now, this Jonathan Case is the grandson of the first Jonathan Case. He was the son of Thomas and grandson of Jonathan Case there. Cobham and Makin operated a glass house, the glass house you saw in Winstanley's engraving, and a colliery to get coal for the glass house in Prescot. They leased land from the Prescot Hall estate from the owners George and Ellen Bradshaw of Brampton in West Yorkshire. Now, Ellen Bradshaw came from Huyton, and her father gave Prescot Hall and the estate to her as part of his marriage settlement or demarriage settlement when she married George Bradshaw and they went to live in Brampton. They were absentee landlords in effect. They weren't proper landlords because the landlord of the land in Prescot is King's College. The land was given to King's College by King Henry VI, and they still own it. Bradshaws were copy holders. That is, they had a copy of a lease from King's College, which allowed them to lease out the colliery to Cobham and Makin, and also farm the land and so on. It was if they were the landlords. This is a map or extract from a map of Prescot Hall surveyed by Thomas Higginson, the Higginson map in 1750. Here's Prescot Hall here, with Hall Lane and the corner of Shore Lane here. And if you go over to here, see the word fire engine against this building, and underneath Compting House. So now we know where the fire engine was. This was Cobham and Makin's fire engine, or Newcomen-type engine. You can see sinking shafts. They're obviously sinking a shaft there, and then another one here, and a row of shafts here, which follow this dotted line, which we think is the roadway in the colliery below ground. If the coal seams are dipping to the south, then a roadway like this will be more or less horizontal. So this is the way a modern coal mine would operate. The difference, of course, in a modern coal mine is they don't have problems with ventilation, but here they would have done, and they'd put lots of shafts down to ventilate the coal mine and then work probably uphill from these shafts in pillar and stall working. There's another roadway there. It says head of the old rank. So that is probably near the top of one coal seam. And there's some more shafts up here and a windmill, which was used, we know from documentary evidence that this was used for draining the coal mine, but it's in the wrong place. It's at the top of the seams. This is this zigzag boundary with Whiston. So this would have been Jonathan Case's land, or Thomas Case's land at that time. We go back to the south prospect of Prescot. Here's that horse gin and some coal. There's the glass house, and we know it's a glass house because it's got ventilation arches in the bottom. These two buildings might be the engine house at that time before it had the beam installed, and the Compting House. And over here, this might be the remnants of strip cultivation or tin lands. So here's Rye Hay. Here's the boundary with Whiston. Here's Prescot Hall. Prescot Brook running down here, supplying water. You need a good water supply for a Newcomen engine. They're not very efficient. And a little brook running here, which would supply the fire engine here. Hall Lane here, past Prescot Hall. Shore Lane running down here, and Stank Lane here. So we've got the first two engines in Lancashire, the 1719 hole in the wall engine owned by Jonathan Case, and the 1744 Prescot Hall colliery owned by Thomas Cobham and Thomas Macon. George Bradshaw died in 1737, and in 1743 Mrs. Bradshaw had a map made drawn by Richard Edge, known as the Edge Map. It recorded the coal seams underlying the property held by her in Prescot and Whiston and some of the other coal owners. So this is the Edge Map. I'll have a drink of water while you peruse that. The first thing to notice is north is not at the top. It's sort of diagonally up here. So it's a little bit misleading. But here's Prescot Church. This is Rye Hay with that zigzag boundary. And the Hoff is there too. And then it says part of Whiston Township. So this is Whiston Township down here. I'm going to show you an extract. North in this direction, Rye Hay, the Hoff, the boundary of Prescot and Whiston. C is marked on the index, which is on the map, as Case's land. In fact, Case owned all this land right up to this boundary and to the edge of Prescot Brook. I'll just draw your attention to these two fields or sites. They're called the Riddings, or well, you're tempted to call them Ridings because that's how they're spelled, R-I-D-I-N-G-S. But they're called Riddings because these represent land which was cleared for cultivation. So they got rid of the weeds and the trees and so on. So hence getting rid of the unwanted vegetation to clear the land, Riddings. I'll mention those there and then come back to them later. Thomas Case ran into financial difficulties in the 1740s. And in 1744, Thomas's creditors forced a financial settlement, but it permitted his son, Jonathan Case II, to take the fire engine and apparatus for working the said mines. And I've got a copy of the document here, and you can see here, take the fire engine and apparatus for working the said mines. That's in an abstract of the title of Henry Case, which is a document that records the title of Henry Case in round about the beginning of the 19th century, but starts from when Ogle leased the land to Jonathan Case. It's 27 pages. We understand that take means take the engine away and put it somewhere else, which was quite common. That was done regularly. So there's an engine at Holith Wall, and when they took the engine away, there was a hole in the wall. Hence it got the name hole in the wall after they took the engine away. And we think they took the engine to here or round about here. where it says there's an old coal pit and it's on the Stank Brook. So they had a convenient water supply for the engine and small coal, slack coal that they could use in the engine from the coal pit. They used the cheapest unsellable coal. Here's Pottery Lane with the pottery and the Latham's house and the London and Manchester Railway. Now, unfortunately, north is at the right-hand side of this, so north is this way. And this is Pottery Lane with the Latham's house. Somebody's conveniently written that there. We've been unable to find the original of this document, so it's only a poor quality photocopy. But here it's got Tenlands engine. So this is where we think they took the Tenlands engine from hole in the wall, creating hole in the wall, and then planted it here. One or two clues as well. Brookfield and Gill Bottom suggest that the Stank Brook came down through here, which it does. Here's Stank Brook coming down past the old coal pit and running into Pottery Lane, or underneath Pottery Lane, and then into this brook down here, which changes its name to Logwood Brook. So we've got the Prescot Brook coming down here, joined by Stank Brook, and then this is changed to Logwood Mill Brook. Cross Lane, Stank Lane, which is now modern Cross Lane, runs to Whiston Cross, and here's the Stank Brook crossing that lane. Mrs. Bradshaw's new engine. About 1750, Mrs. Bradshaw proposed to sink a new pit with a fire engine and shore lane at the southern edge of Prescot Hall property. The pumping shaft would reach the lowest point of the mine where water would collect. The water drained from the mine would run into a nearby brook, which ran through Jonathan Case's property. So that's the Stank Brook. He had previously moved the engine from Holet Wall to a site near the brook, and he complained that the copper-ash water, the iron sulfide stained water draining from Mrs. Bradshaw's new mine, would be unsuitable for feed water for his engine. Mrs. Bradshaw sought an opinion from Nicholas Fazakerly, a Prescot lawyer, and plans and reports and various documents are held in the, I must say, wonderful King's College archive in Cambridge. They call the watercourse papers, and that's the reference. And this is one of the watercourse papers. Bit tricky to read at first. I think Ben and I had to have a good look at this. Ben interpreted a lot of this. He's very good at that sort of thing. Here's Prescot Hall, Hall Lane, and then Stank Lane. That's Hall Lane, and then Stank Lane are running down here. This is Shore Lane, and this is Mrs. Bradshaw's new engine site, or the proposed site. So water pumped by a Newcomen engine from Mrs. Bradshaw's mine would run down into the Stank Brook, or what was actually called the ancient watercourse, which is represented here. And here's where it crosses underneath, or flows underneath Cross Lane, or that's the modern name, Stank Lane in those days. So here's Prescot Hall, here's Hall Lane, Stank Lane, Shore Lane. There's Mrs. Bradshaw's engine site, and the water would drain down into Stank Brook, past the Tenlands engine pit of the second Jonathan Case. In his report, Fazakerly pointed out that the brook was shook. In other words, it subsided due to Case's coal workings collapsing, and the watercourse was repaired and lined with clay to prevent water flooding his mine. In the area where the watercourse had been repaired, the stream is marked as Stank Brook. Stank is an old word meaning to repair a stream or earth dam with clay, and this gave the name to the brook. First came across the word stank when we had a lecture in Merseyside Industrial Heritage Society about the Albert Dock, and Jesse Hartley used the word stank on his drawings for the coffer dams that we used when he built the Albert Dock. Stank the coffer dam. That's when I first came across this word. So back to here again. We think probably this is the area where the stream had to be stanked, particularly where it flows along this field boundary. You can see Whiston Hospital more clearly on this. There's no coal under Whiston Hospital. This is all sandstone. Coal runs from about this point across to just beyond this point. The dispute between Case and Bradshaw must have been resolved, as a subsequent plan appears to show Mrs. Bradshaw's new engine site on Shore Lane. So just very quickly, we've got 3 known engines and a 4th engine with components supplied by Coalbrookdale to Jonathan Case in 1748 and thought to be installed at his Paradise Pit. John Langton wrote an excellent book on coal mining in South West Lancashire, and this is where he thinks, or he suggested, that 1748 engine was at Paradise Pit. On the 1791 plan that I showed you earlier, with 10 Land's engine site, which is off to the right here, north again is on the right. Paradise Colliery is marked here. We can identify that because this is called Paradise Lane, and used to be called something else, Dirty Lane, and this is called Coalgate Lane. If we look at the Ordnance Survey map, this is Paradise Lane coming down from Whiston. So the Paradise engine would have been about here. And this, sorry, no, I'm putting the wrong thing. This is Paradise Lane, called Dirty Lane on this map. And here's Paradise Farm, which is the site of Paradise engine. And then Coalgate Lane runs down here. I'll just draw your attention to here, Riddings Colliery Bridge and Riddings Colliery. I'm going to go back, and here you've got Mr. Gildart's land and lower engine marked. And he had 2 engines. He had an engine there as well. Mr. Gildart is Richard Gildart, formerly the mayor of Liverpool, tobacco dealer, slave owner, and his son James was also involved. So that's that area there. There's the Riddings. I'm just briefly going to mention the opening of the Sanker Canal because that affected coal mining in Prescot. 1757 it opened. In 1769, Jonathan Case opened a new coal mine close to the southern border of Prescot with a link to the turnpike to Liverpool. Known as Carr's Colliery, it allowed Case to drain and mine the coal to the south of Prescot Hall Mine at Rye Hay. In other words, he was mining coal under Bradshaw's land from Carr's Colliery, which is here, and there's Rye Hay. So he was able to mine into this area, which couldn't be drained by that engine there, which is why Mrs. Bradshaw wanted to move the engine or create a new engine there. So Carr's Colliery here has been marked on this map. The map was annotated by John Dickinson, who was the first mines inspector of Lancashire, and he must have wrote this in when he was appointed. He must have visited every mine, and he did this for all of the Lancashire coal mines. Just down here, you've got Tenlands Got, and that's close to the Tenlands engine pit of Jonathan Case II, which is there on the Stank Brook. And then these other names, he uses Wigan names for the coal mines, coal seams. This is the corresponding map of Whiston. He was obviously very interested in what was going on in Whiston. There are a lot more mines there. Riddings Colliery Bridge is here. So this is where Riddings Colliery is. There's a railway running in here. And in the 19th century, that enabled these mines to prosper. So there is a lot of mining in that area. This is a map of Gildart's Riddings Colliery with north at the top. So I've tipped it on its side. Here's the Latham's house, Pottery Lane, and the Logwood Brook, or extension of Prescot Brook. And here there's a little thumbnail sketch of a Newcomen engine house. So we know there was a Newcomen engine there. And we also know there was a ventilation furnace over a coal shaft. These sort of thumbnails are quite common. This is one on a map of Hill Street at a later stage. And if you go to Marks and Spencer's in Prescot, you're virtually standing on that site. So very quickly, Riddings is down here, hole in the wall here in the middle of the golf course now. Riddings down here underneath the motorway. Tenlands engine underneath landfill. Mrs. Bradshaw's new engine is, well, there's a tarmac site there, but I don't think there's any remains. Prescot Hall engine is under there. Oops. There. It's a derelict site. This is just looking where the Tenlands engine would be, under a site of former coal extraction, open cast coal mining post-war. Colgate Lane is still around. There's a street called Colgate Lane, and there's about 20 metres of landfill above that. And Riddings Colliery Bridge still exists, built by George Stevenson and his engineers. About the only sign of coal mining you'll see in the area is this capped shaft on the site of Old Carl's Colliery. And some water running out of that. The shaft's in the back here, with this staining typical of the water you get from coal mines. So Newcomen's engine was the first to produce sufficient power to drain mines. Its design applied the thermodynamic principle that heat can be used to do work. And in that sense, it is the forerunner of steam engines used to generate electricity. My voice is running out and I've overrun time, but thank you for watching.